Good day, grade 12s, and welcome back to our virtual tourism classroom. This is our second lesson based on the topic of foreign exchange. My name is Penny Vosloo. I'm a tourism teacher in the Nelson Mandela Bay district. I would like to acknowledge Erika Ferreira, who has spent many hours compiling these PowerPoints as well as the notes and activities that will be made available once these lessons have been broadcast. Thank you, Erika, for your many hours spent in front of the computer. Erika is the subject advisor for tourism in the Nelson Mandela Bay District Zone 1. Another word of thank you to the Eastern Cape Department of Education, specifically the E-Teaching and Learning Directorate, who have made these online classes possible. Right, today we are looking at foreign exchange, and the first extract is that from your caps. You will see that it starts with the four topics that we dealt with in the previous lesson. Today we are starting with interpretation of a currency rate sheet, conversion of major currencies, also differentiation between the bank buying rate and the bank selling rate. We will also be taking a look at the effect of exchange rates on international tourism, as well as fluctuations in exchange rates. Before we start with the actual lesson, just another aspect that I want to draw your attention to, and that is your examination guidelines for tourism. You will see that under general comments, the impact of currency fluctuation on travel is important here, and you will also note that use only exchange rates expressed as one unit of foreign currency and the equivalent value in rand. You may, or in fact you must, use a calculator, and you must also round off to 2 decimal places. If you look at the bottom bullet, you will see learners must show all calculations. You need to be able to know when to use the bank buying rate and the bank selling rate. You must be able to interpret a currency rate sheet. You must understand the concept of fluctuations and know the reason for fluctuations. Before we continue too far, I'm just going to remove myself from the image so that we start with revision of grade 11 concepts. And the first concept that we will be taking a look at here is that of a currency rate sheet and how to interpret it. A currency rate sheet is a list of the rates of exchange at which foreign currencies are bought and sold. This rate will determine how much foreign currency you will receive when you exchange your money. That is a concept that you were taught in grade 11. If you continue looking at a currency rate sheet, you will see foreign currencies are displayed by a 3-letter code. Now, the first 2 letters of the 3-letter code refer to the name of the country. The third letter refers to the currency. If you take a look at the right-hand side, the bottom of your screen, you will see you have the country name NZ, which is New Zealand, and the currency name D, which stands for dollar. If you look at the top of your screen on the right-hand side, you will also see that there are some currency symbols, which most currencies have to indicate the currency. You have the currency symbol for the dollar, for the euro, for the yen, as well as for the pound. You also, in grade 11, were asked to interpret a currency rate sheet, and I'm sure that this is not a foreign concept to you at this stage. You'll see at the top of your currency rate sheet you have the currency, the code, the symbol, and the exchange rate. Just to point out to you, the rate of exchange is the rate at which one currency will be exchanged for another, And this rate of exchange will determine how much foreign currency you will receive when you exchange your money. That is at the bottom of your currency rate sheet. You also, in grade 11, learned about rounding off to 2 decimal places. In fact, you've learned about it in many different subjects up until this point. I just want to point you to the right-hand side of your screen. You are required to round off to 2 decimal places, and that means that it is to the nearest hundredth. So if you take a look at what is on your screen, you will see that the blue highlighted number in each case is the number that you will be looking at. If you look below the middle one, just in between the second and the third number in each case, if your third number is from 1 to 4, it will stay the same. If it is from 5 and above, then it will be rounded off. But this is very clear in the video that you will be watching straight after this slide.
In this problem, we've been asked to round these two numbers to the nearest hundredth. Whenever you're rounding, you want to find the place value that they tell you to round to. So in this case, since we're rounding to the nearest hundredth, we need to identify the number in the hundredth spot. The first number after the decimal is in the 10th spot. The second number is the hundredth place. So we need to draw a line after the 9. The 9's in our hundredth place. So the question you need to ask yourself is, does the number in the hundredth place stay the same, or does it round up? In order to tell whether to keep it the same or to round it up, you look at the number after it. So we need to look at this 4 here. And when you're telling whether to round or not, if the number is 5 or greater, that means you need to round up. If it's 4 or less, that means you need to keep it the same. So since this is a 4 or less, that tells us that this 9 just stays the same. So our rounded answer would be 15.39. Let's do another one. The number after the decimal is the 10th place. So here the hundredth place is our 2. So draw a line after the 2. So the question we're asking is, does this stay a 2 or do I round it up to a 3? In order to tell, I look at the number after it. This number is 5 or greater, it's a 7, so that tells me that I need to round this 2 up to a 3. So this rounded answer would be 8.63.
At grade 12, I trust that you found that video very interesting and that it will help you in doing your currency conversions. Let's continue with grade 11 work. You'll see up on the screen that it is giving you information about converting currencies. When you are required to convert from South African Rand to a major foreign currency, you were taught in grade 11 to divide by the rate of exchange. If you take a look at this, what's coming up on your screen, you will see that you have 150 Rand, which is being converted to US dollars. Therefore, you are required to divide by the rate of exchange. You look at the screen, it is given to you there as 150 Rand divided by 18.4, which is the rate of exchange, which gives you 8.26901873 US dollars. Now you know that you cannot give that as an answer. You have to round your answer off to 2 decimal places, which will give you 8.27 US dollars, so $8.27. Now look at the right-hand side of your screen. You will see that the sad face is there because the traveler realizes that if he or she is to divide 150 Rand and convert it to US dollars, he will only receive 8.27 US dollars. Hence the sad face there, and it is because he is dividing. If we then continue, you will see if we have to convert from a major foreign currency to South African rand, you will then have to multiply by the rate of exchange. And the example given to you there is again 150, but in this case pounds, that is being converted to South African rand. You will see the rate of exchange in that case is 22.56, and if that calculation is then done, you will see that if you convert 150 pounds at that exchange rate that you have on the screen, you will receive 3,384 rand. Hence the smiley face on the right-hand side of your screen, because it is being multiplied, and you will receive, that traveller will receive, when exchanging 150 pounds, will receive 3,384 rand. Okay, now that was grade 11 work. We're all done with revision now. Now we continue and look at grade 12 work. Again, the slide that you saw earlier during this lesson is up on the screen. It's about interpreting a currency rate sheet, which is a list of the rates of exchange at which foreign currencies are bought and sold. And also, this rate will determine how much foreign currency you will receive when exchanging your money. This currency rate sheet that you see in front of you at the moment differs slightly from the previous one that you saw. Again, it has the currency, it has the code and the symbol, but there are now two columns on the right-hand side indicating exchange rates, one being the bank buying rate and the other the bank selling rate. Just remember, it is always given here as the amount for 1 rand. Another thing I want to point out to you here is that you will see right throughout those currencies given on the screen that the bank selling rate is always higher than the bank buying rate. But we'll get back to a reason for that a little bit later. The bank selling rate versus the bank buying rate. We need to be able to know when to use which rate. Let me give you a definition, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. The bank selling rate is the rate at which the foreign exchange dealer, for example, a commercial bank or perhaps a bureau de change, will sell the foreign currency. The bank buying rate definition, the rate at which the foreign exchange dealers, which be a commercial bank or a bureau de change, will buy the foreign currency. I want you to take a few extra minutes and have a look at the slide on your screen here on the left-hand side. When doing a foreign exchange calculation, always look at it from the South African bank's position. That is a very, very important consideration that you must remember whenever you are doing foreign exchange calculations. The conversion will always be done in South Africa, and therefore you are instructed to always look at it from the position of the South African bank. If you look at the right-hand side of your screen, you will see the question, what is the bank doing with the foreign currency? This is another very, very important question that you must answer yourself or ask yourself with each and every calculation. That will help you in determining whether to use the bank selling rate or the bank buying rate. The first question on your screen, is the bank selling the foreign currency? Therefore, you will have to use the bank selling rate. The next question, is the bank buying the foreign currency? Then you will have to use the bank buying rate. Now, take a look at the image that you have on the screen at the moment. You will see on the left-hand side is the bank or the Bureau de Change. On the right-hand side, you have the tourist. In the middle, you've got money bags containing pound, dollars, yen, and euros. Now, the question is here, must we use the bank buying rate or the bank selling rate? Remember what I said to you with the previous slide? Your question is, what is the bank doing with the foreign currency? So, in this specific case, the tourist needs foreign currency. So the bank, what is the bank doing with the foreign currency? The bank is selling the foreign currency to the tourist. Now the tourist has gone away on holiday. When he comes back from his holiday, he still has some of the foreign currency left over. He goes back to the bank and he must then sell his foreign currency to the bank. The question is, what is the bank doing with the foreign currency? The bank is buying the foreign currency. Therefore, they will do it using the bank buying rate. Now, something else you must remember is that the bank selling rate is always going to be higher than the bank buying rate. The bank buying rate is going to be lower. Now, why is that so? Because the bank always wants to make a profit. So therefore, they will sell the foreign currency at a higher rate than they will buy it back from the tourist. Now we're going to have a few examples here, and I want to see if you can answer these questions. We have a tourist from South Africa who is visiting England. He or she must exchange his South African rand for the currency, the foreign currency, which in this case is the Great British Pound, before his departure. The question is, what rate does the bank use? Is it going to be the bank buying rate, or is it going to be the bank selling rate? Remember what our question was? What is the bank doing with the foreign currency? So we have the tourist. He is planning to go from South Africa to England. He must take his South African rand. He must go to the bank, and he is going to exchange the South African rand for the Great British Pound. What is the bank going to do with the Great British Pound? Think about it. The bank is selling the Great British Pound to the tourist. Therefore, they will use the bank selling rate. Let's take a look at another one. Same tourist is now returning to his home country and must exchange the foreign currency that he has left over, which would be Great British Pound, back into his own currency or the local currency, which would be the South African rand. What do we want to know here? We want to know, will the bank do the transaction using the bank buying rate or the bank selling rate? Again, you ask yourself the question, what is the bank doing with the foreign currency? Is the bank going to be buying the foreign currency or selling the foreign currency? I want you to just take a few seconds and think about it. We have our tourist. He's taking the Great British Pound that he has left over after his holiday to the bank. What is the bank going to do with that foreign currency? The bank is going to buy the foreign currency back from the tourist. Therefore, they will use the bank buying rate. I'm sure that gives clarity and that nobody should have a problem understanding that after these few questions. Now we're going to take a look at some calculations that we have to do. And the first, before we start with any calculations, I want to go through a number of rules. And you will see as they come up you will see each slide has a rule and then application of that rule in each case. So the first rule when doing foreign exchange calculations is that you must identify the currencies that you will be working with in the calculation. Let's read the example given to you on the screen. Use the exchange rate table below to answer the questions that follow. Exchange rate table is given to you, which is the pound sterling, which is the Great British pound. It's just another way of referring to it. You also are given there the bank buying rate or the bank selling rate. Then comes your scenario. Upon their arrival in South Africa, Gareth and his mother exchanged 4,000 Great British pound for South African rand. The instruction, calculate how much they received in rand and round off your answer to 2 decimal places. So if we follow the first rule that is given at the top of the screen, it tells you to identify the currencies that you will be working with. Take a look there at after the word calculate, how much they received in rand. So there is your instruction, calculate, and thereafter that will lead you to the following currency that you have to use in your calculation. So if you take a look up on the screen, you will see the 2 currencies are indicated. The one is GBP, which is the currency or the money that you have. The second one is the rand, which is the currency or the money that you will have after doing the exchange. You are required to calculate how many rand or how much rand after the exchange. Now, let's continue. The next rule is for you to decide if you must multiply or divide by the rate of exchange when doing the calculation. Now, in grade 11 you learnt about it. We have already revised it in this lesson. It is on the screen at the moment. If you are converting from South African rand to a major foreign currency, you must divide. And from a major foreign currency to rand, you must multiply. So let's take a look at what's given to you on the screen. The first rule was identify the currencies. Now we need to decide if we are going to multiply or if we are going to divide. So what do we have here? We have 4,000 Great British pounds that are going to be converted into rand. So we have a major foreign currency being converted to South African rand. I want you to just take a few seconds, think about it. Must we multiply or must we divide? Correct. I hope you got that. Multiply, because we are converting from a major foreign currency into South African rand. Therefore, we must multiply. The next consideration when doing your foreign exchange calculations is to establish the rate of exchange to be used in the calculation. In other words, that means, are we using the bank selling rate or are we using the bank buying rate? Now, if we take a look at the example that is on your screen, our two currencies are the Great British Pound and the Rand. We have determined that because we are converting from a major foreign currency to Rand, we have to multiply. Now we have to determine which rate are we going to use. Now, what was the question that you had to ask yourself? What is the bank doing with the foreign currency? Just take a look at it up on the screen there. What is the bank doing with the foreign currency in this instance? Gareth and his mother are exchanging Great British Pound for Rand. Which is the foreign currency? The Great British Pound. When they go to the bank, what is the bank going to do with the foreign currency? They will be buying the foreign currency from Gareth and his mother. Therefore, they must use the bank buying rate. Then you are required to do the calculation. But remember, show all of your steps and round off your answer to 2 decimal places. Now let's take a look at the right-hand side of your screen here. You will see that it is indicated there that the currency that you have, which in this case is the Great British Pound, must be multiplied by the bank buying rate, which in this case is 18.02. That will then give you the currency that you will have after the exchange, which is in South African Rand. And there you have it on the screen. You will see that 4,000 Great British Pound at the rate of exchange of 18.02 will give you 72,080 South African Rand. Now we're going to have a look at another calculation. Each time the rules will be coming up on the screen. The first rule is identify the currencies that you will be working with in the calculation. And you will see that it's the same scenario, but you now have Gareth and his mother have had their holiday and they have 2,000 South African Rand left over at the end of their trip. And they want to exchange the 2,000 South African Rand for Great British Pound at the O.R. Tambo International Airport before they board their plane back to the UK. Your instruction there is to calculate the amount that they will receive in Great British Pounds. So, if you have to identify the two currencies that you will be working with in the calculation, you will see that it is the South African Rand and the Great British Pound. That's the South African Rand is the currency that you have, and the Great British Pound is the currency or the money that you will have after doing the exchange. Now we go to the next step, and there you must decide if you must multiply or divide by the rate of exchange. I remind you, if you are converting from South African Rand to a major foreign currency, you must divide. And if you are converting from a major foreign currency to Rand, you must multiply. So let's take a look at what we've got on the screen here. We have 2,000 South African Rand that Gareth and his mother are exchanging at O.R. Tambo International Airport before they go back to the UK. They want Great British Pound. We've determined our two currencies, that is the Rand and the Great British Pound. We now must decide if we are going to divide or multiply. So what are we doing here? Are we converting from South African rand to a major foreign currency? Or are we converting from a major foreign currency to South African rand? Take a second to look at the screen. We have 2,000 rand that we want to convert into Great British pound. Therefore, we must divide. Our next step in the calculation is to establish what the rate of exchange is when we are, or is going to be used when we're doing the calculation. Is the bank using the bank selling rate or the bank buying rate? Remember the question for each and every calculation that you're doing, what is the bank doing with the foreign currency? So Gareth and his mother have 2,000 rand. They go to the exchange bureau at the airport before they depart, and they want to exchange that amount of 2,000 South African rand for Great British pound. Ask yourself, what is the bank doing with the foreign currency? What is the foreign currency in this case? Remember, it's from the perspective of the South African bank, so the foreign currency is the Great British pound. What is the bank going to do with the Great British pound? They will be selling it back to Gareth and his mother. Let's take a look at, as it comes up on the screen there. Remember, you've got to do the calculation, you've got to show all steps, and you must round off your answer. So we've got all the basics right here. We know that Gareth and his mother have 2,000 South African rand that they want to exchange for Great British pound, so we must divide. What is the bank doing with the foreign currency? The bank is selling the foreign currency to Gareth and his mother. So the currency that you have, which is the 2,000 rand, must be divided by the bank selling rate, in this case 18.10, which will then give us the currency that we will have after the exchange. So if you take a look at the screen at the moment, you will see 2,000 South African rand divided by 18.10 will give you 110.497238 Great British pound. You also know, grade 12, that you cannot give an answer like that. It must be rounded off. That is why the black line is on the screen. In between the 9 and the 7, you have to round off to 2 decimal places after the comma. So therefore you will look at the 7. Is the 7 5 or above? Yes. So therefore that 49 will become a 50. Right, grade 12, we will now have a look at a few activities and see if you can apply the theory that you have learnt about. First activity, study the information below and answer the questions that follow. You are given an exchange rate table, South African rand against currencies of the world. You have a variety of currencies that are given to you, and you will note that you are given a bank selling rate as well as a bank buying rate. Ms. Nobuhle Maliti lives in South Africa and wants to visit the United States of America. She has 58,000 rand for the trip. Her return flight ticket will cost 26,000 rand. The USA visa and travel insurance will cost 3,800 rand. And the tour package for the USA is 23,100 rand. The instruction that you are given, calculate in rand the total cost of Ms. Maliti's trip to the USA. Now this is a very straightforward question, grade 12. All you are required to do here is take the three amounts that are given to you: 26,000 Rand for the return flight ticket, 3,800 Rand for the visa and travel insurance, and 23,100 Rand for the tour package. Add the three together, which then give you 52,900 Rand, and that is the total cost of Miss Maliti's trip. The next question: will Miss Maliti have enough money for the trip? Please note, grade 12, that this question has two parts to it. The first one is, will she have enough money? The second one is, you have to give a reason for your answer. So you shouldn't have any problems answering this question. You will see that the correct answer is up on the screen. Yes, she will have enough money. And the reason is because she has not exceeded her budget and will have 5,100 Rand extra. How did this answer come about? Look above yes, and you will see there's the 58,000 Rand that Miss Maliti has for the trip. The trip will cost her 52,900, which is what you calculated in question 3.3.1. Therefore, that means that she will be left with 5,100 Rand left over. Miss Maliti exchanges 58,000 Rand for US dollar at the OR Tambo International Airport. Using the exchange rate table above, calculate the amount of US dollars Miss Maliti received when she exchanged the 58,000 Rand. Now, if you go back to the steps that we had in the previous section of this lesson, you will remember that your first step was to identify the currencies, and you can see here that you are working with Rand and US dollar. The second step was that you had to determine whether you were going to multiply or if you were going to divide. So look and see what you've got here. You have 58,000 Rand. You must calculate how much that will be in US dollars. So you're going from Rand to a major international currency. So therefore, think about it for a second. What must you do? Must you multiply or must you divide? You must divide. Now we're going to have to determine which rate we're going to use, the bank buying rate or the bank selling rate. Ask yourself the question, what is the bank doing with the foreign currency? Miss Maliti is exchanging 58,000 Rand for US dollars. So what is the bank doing with the US dollars? They are selling the US dollars to Miss Maliti. So therefore we will be using the bank selling rate. And there is the correct answer on your screen. 58,000 Rand divided by the bank selling rate 14.11, which is going to give you the amount that you see on your screen in front of you. The final example based on this question: when Miss Maliti returned to South Africa, she had 150 US dollars left, which she exchanged at the OR Tambo International Airport. Calculate the amount of Rand she received. When we identify the two currencies, again we are working with the South African Rand and the US dollar. The next step in our calculation, we need to determine if we must multiply or if we must divide. You will see there that Miss Maliti has 150 US dollars. You are therefore converting from a major foreign currency to Rand. And when doing that, you must multiply. The next step is to go to the bank buying rate or the bank selling rate. And remember how we determine that. We ask ourselves the question, what is the bank doing with the foreign currency? In this case, Ms. Maliti took her 150 US dollars. She wants to exchange them for rand. Therefore, the bank is buying the US dollars from Ms. Maliti. And you will see the answer up on the screen now. You have your 150 US dollars. We have to multiply. We have to use the bank buying rate, which will give her the amount on the screen at the moment. The following example that we have in this lesson is Mrs. Fortuin is going on her first European tour, and she will include a visit to her company's office in Brussels. She goes to a foreign exchange bureau requesting information on Forex. You are given a Forex exchange rate table with euro and the bank selling rate as well as the bank buying rate. There you have the first question. Mrs. Fortuin will carry 500 euro in cash and load 1,250 euro onto her credit card for the European tour. You are instructed to calculate how much she will pay in rand to receive 500 euro. So if we go back to our steps, the first step was identify the currencies, and you can see that the currencies here are the rand and the euro. Step number 2 was to determine if we have to multiply or divide. We have got 500 euro, so we are working from a major foreign currency towards rand, so we must therefore multiply. The next step in our calculation is for us to determine if we must use the bank buying rate or the bank selling rate. And if you ask yourself, what is the bank doing with the foreign currency? The bank is selling the foreign currency to Mrs. Fortuin because she must receive 500 euro. And there you will see the answer up on the screen. 500 euro multiplied by 16.65 will give Mrs. Fortuin the amount of 8,325 rand. The next question, calculate how much she will need to pay in rand for 1,250 euro. Again, we go back to our steps, which instruct us to determine which two currencies we're working with. And again, it's the rand and the euro. The next step is for us to decide if we should multiply or divide. Again, here we are working with 1,250 euro, and we have to convert it into rand. So we're going from a major foreign currency into rand. So we need to multiply. And the next question is, which rate should we be using, the bank buying rate or the bank selling rate? What is the bank doing with the foreign currency? The bank is selling the foreign currency to Mrs. Fortuin. And you will see that is evident on the screen, where you have 1,250 euro, which you multiply by the rate of 16.65, which is going to give Ms. Fortuin 20,812 Rand and 50 cents. The next on the question coming up on the screen, you will see on Mrs. Fortuyn's return to South Africa, she has a 5,000 euro gift voucher from her office friends in Brussels. You are instructed to calculate how much she will receive in Rand. Your two currencies, again, is the South African Rand and the Euro. We now have to decide, are we going to multiply or divide? What are we doing here? Mrs. Fortuyn has 5,000 euro, so we have to calculate how many Rand she will be receiving. So if you're going from a major foreign currency to Rand, you have to multiply. Now we go and look at what rate we should be using here, the bank selling rate or the bank buying rate. Ask yourself, what is the bank doing with the foreign currency? Go back to your example. The bank is buying the foreign currency back from Mrs. Fortuyn. So they will therefore use the bank buying rate. And there you have the answer up on the screen. You have 5,000 euro, which you will multiply by the bank buying rate, which is 15.72, which will mean that Mrs. Fortuyn received an amount of 78,600 Rand. There are two more aspects that we need to take a look at, and that is the effect of exchange rates on international tourism and fluctuation. The first one is the effect on exchange rates on international tourism, and we will be taking a look here at a strong Rand versus a weak Rand. So on your screen, you have on the left-hand side, you have a strong Rand, which is indicated by the green arrow going upwards. On the right-hand side of your screen, you will have the red arrow going downwards, which will indicate a weak Rand. In each case, you will see that both outbound and inbound tourists are addressed in each case. So let us say the Rand is strong. Outbound tourists means that us as South Africans are going to travel to other countries. What effect does that strong Rand have on those tourists? South African outbound tourists will be more likely to travel to international destinations because it is more affordable for us because our Rand is strong. But on the other hand, if you look at the effect of a strong Rand on inbound tourists, in other words, we now have tourists coming to South Africa when the Rand is strong. They will perceive South Africa as an expensive destination, and they may consider to travel to cheaper destinations where they will get more value for their money. On the other hand, let us say that the Rand is weak. The effect of a weak Rand on outbound tourists, remember, that is when we as South Africans want to travel when the Rand is weak. South African outbound tourists will find it expensive to travel to most international destinations and will choose destinations where we have the greatest value for our money. On the other hand, if the Rand is weak, the effect on inbound tourists is different because many inbound international travelers will visit South Africa because the rand is weak in relation to their currency. So the exchange rate will then result in the rand being weak in relation to the currency. Therefore, South Africa will be regarded as a value for money destination. The last thing we need to look at before we take some more examples is fluctuations in exchange rates. I'll just bring all of the words up, the sentences up onto the screen here. Fluctuations in exchange rates are changes in the value of a currency in relation to another currency. Currencies fluctuate based on supply and demand, and that supply and demand is linked to various factors. The monetary policy of the country, the rate of inflation, political and economic conditions in the country. If you take a look at the next slide that is on your screen now, you may remember it from the previous lesson. It indicates fluctuations in the exchange rate between the rand and the euro. I want to draw your attention in particular to the right-hand side of your graph, of your image, where the graph is, that shows that the value of the rand in relation to the euro fluctuates. You will see the graph going up and down, and that means fluctuation. Now, some more activities. Again, you have been given a currency rate sheet, which gives you South African rand against various currencies of the world. Your question that you have now comes out of the November 2018 NSC question paper. Your first question is, give one reason why the bank selling rate of the currencies in the table is higher than the bank buying rate. Now, these questions based on this currency rate sheet you may see are of a slightly different nature. Your examining panel will ask you things in a different way, so that you won't always get the same type of questions in question 3 in your exam paper. So the reason why the bank selling rate is higher than the bank buying rate, stop and think about it. I said it to you a little bit earlier. The reason is the bank has to make a profit. So therefore, the bank selling rate, they will sell the currency at a higher rate than when they will buy it back. In the table above, identify the 2 countries where South Africans will receive the greatest value for their money. Now, go and have a look at the table on the left-hand side of your screen. If a South African exchanges rand for, let's say, a euro, he or she will be have to pay 16.85 rand in order to obtain a euro, 14.11 in order to buy a US dollar. So that should immediately assist you in answering the question, which 2 countries will give South Africans the greatest value for their money? And those are obviously going to be the 2 countries where the South Africans will pay the least amount to buy the currency of that country. And there you see up on the screen the Czech Republic, which is the currencies, the Czech koruna, and Egypt uses the Egyptian pound. The next question that you have up on the screen here is to study the exchange rate sheet and answer the questions. You will see that on the left-hand side axis you have values, and on the bottom axis you have dates. So the question here is to state the value of the South African rand in relation to the US dollar on the 8th of October 2013. So you will go and see where you find the 8th of October, and if I can just perhaps indicate to you on the screen using the mouse, you will see that is where it is, and the value there was 10 rand. The line graph shows daily changes in the rate of exchange. Give the term used for these changes in the exchange rate. Now that was what we just discussed prior to this, and that was fluctuations. Now you will see a question that requires a little bit of thinking here. Determine the date and the value. Please note that there are two components here, the date and the value of the exchange rate when the rand was at its weakest and when it was at its strongest. So you're looking for the bottom and the top point of the graph here. But it's not only that you're looking for, you have to remember which one is weakest and which is strongest. So the top point of your graph is there where I'm showing you on the 29th of September. And you will see that the value there was over 10.10. But is that when the rand was at its weakest or at its strongest? The other value that I just want to indicate to you there is where it was at its lowest on the 23rd of October, where that was just over 9.75. But again, I want to ask you, is that when the rand is weak or strong? So the first one, that when the rand, you have to pay over 10 rand to get a dollar, means that the rand was weak there. So your first answer should be, if you have worked it out correctly, that was the date at the 29th of September and the value was just over 10.10. Let's have a look, see as it comes on the screen. Yes, well done. And then obviously the rand being at its strongest is on the other end of the scale, less than 9.75, which was there on your graph, which was on the 23rd of October. Grade 12, that brings us to the end of foreign exchange. I certainly hope that you've enjoyed these lessons. I certainly hope that you've learnt a lot from these lessons, and wish you very well in your forthcoming studies for the year, and I'm sure you will do well in your exams.